All right, it's not every day that you get to sit with an extraordinary founder and get to pick his brain on what it takes to build successful companies. Mohit needs no introduction, but just I'll say a few words. Mohit is no stranger to the startup ecosystem. He's was the co-founder of Nutanix and was the founder and CEO of Cohesity. Both are unicorns. In fact, I was telling Mohit, I was checking the market cap for Nutanix today morning. It's now 19 billion. So congratulations, Mohit. And we're excited and hoping to see Cohesity go public very soon. Now, having built like two massive companies, it's not everyone who's kind of seen that entire journey. And you're a masterclass in helping figure out like what are pain points, like how do you kind of build a company, how do you scale a company, you understand enterprise go-to-market really well. So maybe it'll be remiss if I didn't start the conversation by asking you like the more fundamental question of, you do a lot of background work before you actually start writing code. What's the framework that goes through your mind before you enter a new space and want to build a company around it?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Right? It's great to be here. So I'll give you my motivation for that framework first, before I go into the framework itself. So I think people will probably, identify with this. Often when we see companies failing, don't we often think, what was that founder thinking? I could have told him or her that this company is not going to succeed. Conversely, sometimes there are a lot of naysayers for companies, and yet they succeed, right? So clearly, there's something going on. So I, crystallized all that into what I call a hypothesis document. It's almost like when you start companies, the founders should write a hypothesis, and we'll talk about, a breakdown on what that should contain. But let's just say that it's a case for why the company would succeed. And if you run that hypothesis with a few objective people, and if they all say that it's solid, there's a high probability that the company would succeed, right? That's the way to think about it. If everyone you show the hypothesis to is like, no, there's no way this is going to succeed, then there's a high probability it will not succeed, and you're just drinking your own Kool-Aid, right? So that's what prompted me to think about this. So, so the way I advise people on the hypothesis, it's a formal framework that I've built. It has 4 sections. The first section is your elevator pitch. It is literally imagine yourself to be in the elevator with your potential customer. What are you going to say to that customer? You have 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, what are you going to say so the customer becomes interested to at least try your product? That's your elevator pitch. If it takes you, more than 5 minutes, you're doing it wrong, right? So that's the first section of the hypotheses. The second section is what I call the minimum lovable product, MLP, not MVP. I don't like MVP because everyone can define MVP in their own way, right? Minimum viable product, what does that mean? So what's the first product, the minimum lovable product that you're going to build? What are the features that will have? The reason that's important is because the company's success depends on that. Sometimes I often see founders talk about how great their company is going to be 10 years from today, and they're going to do this and do that. Well, the point is you never reach there if the MLP is not successful. So it's very important to crisply define what the MLP is and make a case for why that's going to be successful before you think about what comes in the future. So that's the second section, crisply defining exactly what the MLP is going to be. The third section is, your points about why do you think the company is going to succeed. So literally the title of that section is, why is the company going to succeed? What are all the points behind why the company is going to succeed? And the last section is even more important and interesting. It's actually, why do you think the company is not going to succeed? Put yourselves in the shoes of a naysayer. Right? I'm sure there are lots of naysayers. What are the naysayers saying, and what are your rebuttals against those? Right? And if you can write that all down in a hypothesis, all these 4 sections, show it to people, and people, the objective people at least, say that it's solid, there's a high probability this company is going to succeed, then you have a case. Otherwise, you're just playing a lottery. There's a high probability the company is not going to make it, right? It's all probabilities. Some companies will probably, maybe still make it, but there's a higher chance if the hypothesis is not solid, you're not going to make it. And founders, we all know that people start companies and they really badly want it to succeed. And once they start, even though they never made a hypothesis, it's not solid, then they keep, putting money into it, keep putting hard work into it. 4 years down the line, they have to shut down the company, and they're like, why me? Why don't my company succeed? So if they just build that hypothesis, there's a high probability it'll be succeed.
That's a very, very thoughtful framework. I'm curious if you could also put this in the perspective of a company that you've built before.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take my first company, Nutanix, as an example. So for people who may not know Nutanix, Nutanix brought into the world a concept called hyperconvergence. So before Nutanix, people used to buy compute from one vendor, and then they'll buy storage from another one, right? And then they'll connect them together with networking, and then run their applications on this combined infrastructure, right? Run their virtual farms or what have you. So what Nutanix did is it collapsed all that. It basically said that the same server can run both compute and storage. And they did it through virtualization, right? So that was the concept of hyperconvergence at a higher level, right? And the very first MLP was to actually solve for virtual desktops. Virtual desktops were very expensive. And as soon as Nutanix came up with this product, they became quite cheap. And that was the first customers that we addressed. So the elevator pitch was simply, rather than buying your compute and storage from separate vendors, you can buy it from us. It'll cut down your costs by something like 80%, right? That was the elevator pitch. The MLP was crisply that the first product, you can host virtual desktops on it. It'll be a virtualized product, consolidated, the same servers. It's a distributed farm. And on that, you'll run your virtual servers and virtual desktops. And it'll cut down the cost by, I think, something like 5x. The third section was, why would it succeed? So let's speak about some of the hardware trends as an example. I think up until Nutanix was founded in 2009, Moore's law was still active. Compute bandwidths and speeds were increasing year after year. Storage speeds were increasing, storage capacities were increasing. So compute and storage were both increasing year after year, right? But networking, when I came to the Silicon Valley in 2000, the networking that came to my desktop was 1 gigabit. The networking that comes to my desktop today, 24 years later, is a gigabit. So the networking has not improved, right? Or even if you can take 10 gig in the data centers, it's improved by 10x. Compute speeds and storage speeds have increased by way more than that, like order of magnitude more than that. So doesn't it make sense to get the networking out of the way, right? And have the compute and storage, which used to sit away and connected by the network, to come together, right? And so that was a huge propeller underneath Nutanix that made it successful. Add to that the improved manageability, reduced costs, and a whole ton of other benefits. So that's the case for why it would succeed. Then if you speak to naysayers, and they were naysayers, right? So some of the naysayers said that, SANs are getting cheaper, right? And your hyperconverged product will not fly because the bigger companies will kill you. Well, our rebuttal was that manageability is still going to be a problem. Right? So for every one of the naysayer arguments, we had a rebuttal, which was pretty solid, as in not just for us. And I can be drinking my own Kool-Aid, right? Who knows? But if we actually show it to people, they actually blessed it, that, okay, this rebuttal is solid. So we had a bunch of such things. And that's an example of why it was a very solid hypothesis. So
I just wanted to also dig into that piece, right? I think you mentioned that MLP is kind of the insertion point, and then you have a big vision. With Nutanix, you had the big vision of hyperconvergence.
Right.
At what point in the product journey do you decide that you need to focus on the next piece of the journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what he's saying is that the MLP is just the beginning. A lot of companies make a mistake, and this is also part of your hypotheses. What are you going to do beyond the MLP? If your vision, if your overall vision equals the MLP, it's a mistake. Because even if the MLP flies, a lot of people, there are going to be competitors who start copying. And you have nowhere to go. Your vision equals your MLP. So your vision ought to be bigger than the MLP. The question then is that, there might be multiple moving parts in your vision. Which one do you attack first? Well, once your MLP is successful, your customers will tell you that. Right? So literally the customers will almost, become the product managers, and they'll tell you exactly what you need to focus. And so you may have a bigger vision, but then what exactly to pursue in that vision, let that be driven by marketing forces. Right? So it's actually not that hard a problem. All you need to do is have a bigger vision, and then which one of that you're actually going to attack next, just ask your customers.
Since we are at this question of like building the pipeline of and kind of the future of the product, be remiss if I didn't ask you, how do you balance quality of the product versus velocity? Because at the end of the day, you want to build quickly for the market. You're seeing those trends happen in front of you. You're seeing those pain points. And you could very rush something to the market, which the customers are not delighted by. But like, and what is your framework for thinking of that?
So I've learned this the hard way. I stand by strongly behind what I'm going to say now. So we have made mistakes in my companies when at certain points in the company, we sacrificed quality, or the team sacrificed quality for the velocity. And there is a way to actually get both. And so what I do now, the methodology we use, the playbook, is we use what is called a requirement scorecard. So let me explain the concept. So people here probably know what's a design doc and what's a PRD, product requirements document. So what people do is they'll build, let's say, a product requirements document. They'll write down the features or goals or whatever you may want to call them in that, or they will have it in their design docs. The problem is that nobody kind of consults these documents once the product is made. And even if the product is made, the people implementing the product may make some shortcuts and for the velocity, right? And so you don't even know what exactly the PRD says that do these 10 things, and they may do 7 of them. That too, they cut some corners. And now it's all customers filing bugs and shouting and screaming, and that's kind of how you iterate and solve the problem. That's, in my mind, the wrong way to do it. So the right way to do it is to actually take those, I call them requirements. I do not like calling them goals, because goals tend to be best effort. Requirements are requirements. So take those requirements out of your design docs and PRDs, wherever you keep them, and make them first-class citizens. Put them in what I call a requirement scorecard. So the requirement scorecard can be just a simple spreadsheet, which captures all the requirements that particular feature or your product, depending on where you are in your company. All the requirements are written in a requirement scorecard or spreadsheet, whatever. And then against every requirement, you have first of all the release when it's going out. Is it going out in V1, V2, blah blah blah. And I need sign-offs, right? When it does go out, I need the sign-off from the technical lead, the product manager, the QA person, and the manager of that. So if that gets released, if that feature gets released and it has problems, who signed off on that? Right now, people are very careful about, they may postpone a feature to the next release. So when we actually do release something, we precisely know what requirements are actually met and what are not met, right? So that we can proactively track them, right? So sometimes for velocity, we may shave on the requirements. We cut down the requirements that we satisfy. So we release something that meets less of the requirements. That's okay, as long as it's a collaborative decision that we can actually, that it is still a lovable product. But we are proactively working on the missing requirements, as opposed to waiting for the customer to tell us what's missing, right? So now you can balance the quality and the velocity quite well. So that's practice that. I'll be surprised if things don't work.
Thank you for that nuanced take. Shifting gears a bit and talking more about the 0 to 1 journey, because you've been through multiple of those. One of the most important things is people and bringing the right people on board. And like companies face like multiple challenges, but kind of the two core challenges are A, how do I identify like high quality people who would be excited about my company? B, like if I've identified them, how do I convince them? Actually not 2, 3, how do I convince them? And C, if I've convinced them, how do I evaluate them? Are they the right people? Are they the right fit for the size of the organization? So let's maybe take the first piece of it, which is A, how do you identify, and B, how do you convince, and then we can touch the evaluation piece.
Yeah. So first of all, let me talk about the wrong way of doing things, because I've done it.
Yeah, it's great.
The wrong way is you get tons of people who are sent to you by whoever, right? Recruiters, your advisors, what have you. You interview all of them. You don't even have the time, but however much you can, you interview. And as you interview, right, it's maybe a little bit easier to hire technical talent because you can ask them programming puzzles, but harder to hire the non-technical people because after all, what are you going to ask them on a whiteboard? And so what ends up happening is it's a chemistry match, right? If you like the guy, I can go have beer with this guy and have a nice chat with him, you hire, right? But then you hire the person and the person can't do the job. Absolutely wrong way, right? You probably don't do any reference checks. And even if you do the reference check, this is the wrong way to do it. You pick up the phone, hey, is this a great guy? And yeah, this is a great guy. Okay, hired.
Yep.
So all these are wrong ways of doing it. So what we do is we want to take the emotion out of hiring. So the first thing you do is even before you even start looking at candidates, you build a number of competencies for the role. Every role that you have has a different set of competencies that you need. So you should write them down. And write down the big rocks, not the some small pebbles, right? So I advise no more than 8 to 12, right? So you write down 8 to 12 big competencies. And I like to divide them into 3 parts. Each of those 3 parts, no more than 8 to 12. So the first part is what I call a pre-interview scorecard. So that's something that you use even before you interview the person, right? So you can use it as, with the person's resume, and at most when you phone screen the person, right? So that will filter out people who are not even matching your pre-interview criteria. So for instance, if I'm hiring a sales leader, one of the pre-interview competencies might be that this person has run sales at some enterprise company. He's been in sales, he or she has been in sales for 5 to 10 years. Whatever, are the competencies that are suitable for your company. So that will filter out candidates. So that saves so much time interviewing the person unnecessarily when the person is not even meeting the pre-interview criteria. So then you start interviewing. So again, the second scorecard is what I call an interview scorecard. So this is the scorecard you use when you actually do an in-person interview. And you divide up the competencies amongst all your interviewers, right? So you can test for 12 things. One person cannot test for all of them. So if the panel of interviewers, let's say I have a panel of 4 or 5 people, I'll give everyone 3 competencies. I'll tell you test these 3, I'll test these 3, right? So between all of us, and there'll be some overlap. So between all of us, we will build what the person is really competent at. And we will score them. It's a data-driven approach. So let's say use a score of 1 to 4. 1 is poor, 2 is fair, 3 is good, 4 is excellent. So each of the competencies gets a score. And then, once everyone has scored it, we come together and tally the scores and come up with the net score. And if the net score is if it's below a threshold, it's a reject. If it's above a threshold, then we look at if any individual competency has low score and if we can somehow compensate for that. So that's the data-driven approach we use. And if we interview multiple candidates, our goal is to hire the person with the best score. And the last scorecard I use is a reference check scorecard. So literally, I think about upfront what questions to ask the people who are doing the reference or are going to be the references. And I always like to state, the questions on a scale of 1 to 10. So for instance, one of the questions I will ask is, do strong performers in your organization like this person on a scale, where do they like them on a scale of 1 to 10?
Mm-hmm.
If the answer to any of my questions is like a 6 or lower, it's a fail.
Yeah.
People don't want to be negative, so if they are negative in their mind, they will give a 6.
Mm-hmm.
You're really looking for an 8 or more,
Mm-hmm.
right? And even if they give an 8, I would ask them, so why not a 9? Right? And that brings out the problems.
Right.
It forces them to divulge some of the problems. So this is the technique I use, and I've been quite successful at nailing down the right candidate. So between this, the pre-interview scorecard cuts a lot of time. The interview makes it very data-driven, and then reference checks. You really nail down what you're looking for. Right?
Love the data-driven way. Once the candidate is there, I think the big debate then that happens between cash and equity.
Yeah.
Right? There's so many well-capitalized companies right now, especially right now, and they can afford more cash. They might not be able to afford that much equity because they've been so well-capitalized. How have you, you've given some beautiful anecdotes to me personally, but it'd be great if you can share those as well. So how do you convince people?
Yeah, so, if you're founding a company or you're young in the stage of the company, what you really want to look for is the person actually is really into the company, right? They're coming, it's not a mercenary approach. I look for people who go for more equity. So what I tell them, sometimes people that I hire themselves don't have this clarity. So let's say they're coming from some big company where they're making a ton of cash, right? And they are thinking about, well, this is going to be lesser cash or what have you. So I ask them, okay, so hypothetically, let's assume they're making, I don't know, 300K. So I ask them, how much are your expenses, right? So let's just throw a number, right? Say they're spending, if they don't want to drain their bank account, maybe 150 is enough. So I ask them, well, if you get 300, what do you do with the rest of the money? Well, I'm going to put it in the stock market. And the stock market is going to deliver what, 6%? Why don't you take that money and invest in yourself? If you truly believe in this company, then you're going to get way more returns. You're an insider in this company, right? If you don't believe in this company, you should leave and go somewhere else where you do believe in the company. If you do believe in the company, invest in yourself. So get as much cash and a little bit of buffer on top. That is enough to pay the bills and a little bit of buffer on top. But the rest, take in equity. And if somebody is aligned to that approach, then that's the person for the company. If they're not, you should think twice. So this person is maybe just not a fit for a startup.
Love it.
Right? The next big company that's going to come and give him more cash he's going to go there. Right? So may not be a fit.
Last piece before we run out of time. Actually, the second last. I'll have one more question for you after that. Most of these companies like that we back and that you've built have been founded by engineering product people, and you've had to teach yourself go to market, and it's a combination of science and art, and it requires, especially in the 0 to 1 journey, I think having some hypothesis around how things might work beyond, when you're building your product like that, you're thinking about your customers like that. How should people think about it at that stage, at the earliest stages?
Yeah, when it's the very early stage, again, even there people do it wrong, and I've been there.
Right.
So first of all, please understand that even if your hypothesis is strong, it takes a little bit of effort and time to really articulate your message. And the only person who can do that or the people who can do that are the founders. So it's a mistake to hire a salesperson and let that person be the only one talking to customers. Because that person will only say what you told that person to say. They will not change the message. A founder, on the other hand, will dynamically tweak the message until it works. So it's very important for founders to be involved in the sales process early on, right? So that's requirement number 1. So if that's the requirement, then it's also very important, because founders also are potentially building the product and doing tons of other stuff. It's also very important to keep the sales team a little bit tamed in the beginning. What people make a mistake on is whenever they get a customer from anywhere, they just, okay, let's grab that customer and maybe hire a sales guy there. Wrong. So what you should do upfront is focus on the sales territories region by region. Probably start closer to home. Right? If it's a good territory. So let's say we are in California, choose something that's closer to the Bay Area and only hire salespeople there and only look for customers there. So that way you can go there easily, right, when you're trying to close sales. And then once you've hired 5 or 6 people, right, so you start by hiring not the VP of sales, that's also a mistake, right? Hire maybe a great district manager from somewhere, make them a director of sales, give them, you know, a title jump, and have them hire 5, 6 people underneath, but only in a certain territory. And once that territory is successful, you do the same in another region, still in the US, so you can fly easily. So by the time you do it in 2 or 3 territories, your pitch is pretty solid. Then you can put a head of sales on top. And then you can think of expanding, you know, in further regions, maybe even internationally or something. But the biggest mistake, I've seen founders, they start, you know, getting customers in Singapore and Australia and whatnot. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? You still haven't nailed down your message. So never do that. So always start very focused. And resist the urge to even get customers in other regions, because to get customers, you need to hire salespeople. And let's agree that, you know, just to draw an analogy, the movie stars cannot make the movies successful all by themselves. Right? They need a cast of characters around them. It's the same with sales guys. So just because you drop a salesperson in a certain territory doesn't mean that territory will become successful or that sales guy will become successful. You need to put a sales engineer and some marketing people and maybe some alliance people and some channel people and maybe some solution architects. So there's a whole supporting cast of characters. And you can't have a supporting cast of characters all over the place, right? That's why it's very important to build territories one by one and put that supporting cast of characters there and only then expand. That's the proper way to do it. And do them in the biggest time areas. One mistake people do is they'll go somewhere where, you know, there's no customers, maybe 1 customer. Well, go in the hotbeds first, right? California is a nice one. You know, Southeast is great. The Tola region around Texas is great. New York is great. There's so many great regions. Start from there, right? Take any one of them, hopefully one that's closer to home, and start from there and build them one by one. Even when you go international, I made this mistake too, or rather my head of sales made this mistake. They just found customers in like Italy and Spain and whatnot, and they started putting salespeople there. Big mistake. No, the biggest 3 TAMs in Europe are Germany, France, and UK. Start there. Any one of them, right? Start with UK. You know, UK is great because the laws are quite good, much easier to let go of underperformers. So start in UK. Don't resist the urge to get customers elsewhere, right? So that's kind of how you start.
Awesome. I know we are out of time, but one last question. Given this platform shift, I know you've built 2 companies prior to this platform shift. What are you most excited about?
So I'm actually quite excited. You know, the AI is the talk of town. You know, the nice thing is that earlier, the way we used to build products, we used to actually code first, and then whatever software we coded up will produce some output. So it's a paradigm shift that AI has bring to the table, where, you know, they look at the output, learn from that how it can be coded automatically, and then that resulting code, that learned stuff, can then produce more outputs. So given this, it can actually be applied to whichever industry you know, right? Every industry can benefit from that approach and do so much more. So I'm actually excited about what AI can actually do to not just newer industries, but to existing ones. And so that's what I'm excited about.
On that positive note, Mohit, thank you so much. Very grateful, as always. Thank you.